damned, impure and polluting. India's untouchables, or Dalits, in their self-description, have for millennia suffered unspeakable degrees of humiliation and degradation. Consigned to the outskirts of the village society, Dalits have experienced the most visible form of segregation. As outcasts, Dalits were outside the public sphere of caste society. Denied the mainstream lifestyles, Dalits couldn't access even the caste Hindu gods and places of worship. As if that wasn't enough, caste society enforced a distinctive lifestyle on Dalits. By tradition, Dalits were denied to dress up to the toe and ankle. Sporting gold jewelry was forbidden. A Dalit groom riding a horse ran the risk of being attacked. That denial translated into a distinctive food regime for Dalits. The Dalit lifestyle was shackled into certain distinctive occupations with Dalit-only markers. Further changes were in store. The ground was laid by the British Empire. But major changes came with the dawn of organized modernity when India turned a republic in 1950. The Constitution of India, fathered by Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, their Abraham Lincoln in suit, boot and hat, mandated their freedom. The ancient caste rules, represented by the Manu Dharma, now lost their official legitimacy. Now, by law, Dalits gained full citizenship. By 1990, while the newly emerged Dalit middle class had turned restless and assertive, the economic reforms stepped in. Fear followed. Anxiety level running high, Dalits thought that the economic reforms would undermine the authority of the state, giving the caste society a free run. The reformers, on the other hand, did not know that there existed a Dalit concern. It is nearly 2 decades since the wheel of reforms rolled down, but no one knows the kind of impact the reforms have had on the caste order in general and on the lives of Dalits in particular. Is reform stereotyping Dalits' lifestyle even more? Is reform bestowing on the Dalits a caste-neutral lifestyle? Is the caste order getting stronger, or is it on the run? In search of answers to these critical questions, the Center for the Advanced Study of India, or Kashi, undertook a mammoth household census of Dalits in the Uttar Pradesh countryside, touching almost 20,000 families. India, 1 billion plus people, 161 million Dalits. Uttar Pradesh, 161 million plus people, home to 32 million Dalits. Azamgarh, 4 million people, 1 million Dalits. Bilariaganj, 234 villages, 187 villages inhabited by Dalits, 9,170 Dalit households. One of the 20 development blocks of Azamgarh, Bilariaganj has no industry, not even a cottage industry or handicrafts. All lived on agriculture and allied activities. We followed the Kashi study and bring before you the results. The age-long caste-destined occupational hierarchy reflects in food hierarchies along caste lines. Of the 3 principal food regimes, rice-based, wheat-based and millet-based, Dalits got identified with the millet-based food regime. They used to eat pea leaves with mustard leaves, roti chutney, and used to drink jaggery ras or sugarcane juice as staple food. Eating roti, dal, and using tomatoes and cardamom in their food were considered a luxury to them. The Kashi study finds a major shift in Dalit food habits. Sama, or the barnyard millet, the mustard-sized grain eaten by the poorest of the poor, is a substitute to rice. Elsewhere in the world, barnyard millet is grown as a forage grass. Stigmatized as a predominantly Dalit food, more than 50% Dalits ate barnyard millet in 1990. But now, the barnyard millet has disappeared from the Dalits menu.
जैसे मड़ुआ हुआ, कोडो हुआ, सावा हुआ, जौ हुआ, मटर हुआ, रारो, वही तो हम लोग खाकर जिंदगी बीतती थी। खान पान में तो बहुत ज़्यादा अंतर हो गया है। हाँ, पहले यही पिताजी हमारे जो है कि ले आते थे तो वही पुराना रह गया है। सावा कोदो और जो लतरी वगैरह ले आते थे, पीस कूट के सतुआ भी भुजाते थे, यही सब करते थे, रोटी राटी पकाते थे, तो हम लोग खा के गुजारा करते थे अपना। जब धीरे धीरे हम लोग बाहर निकल गए तो खाना भी बदल गया और हम लोग भी बदल गए।
High in calorie, the jaggery water was consumed by the largest majority of Dalits as part of the staple food. Sometimes, many Dalit families would have only jaggery water as the meal at lunch. Jaggery water also formed part of the wage given to farm workers. In the year 1990, 86.8% Dalit families, always or very often, drank jaggery water as part of the staple food at lunch in the summer.
गुड़ बनाने के लिए दिन भर जो है खेती में कार्य करते थे, उनका गन्ना कोड़ते थे, खड़ी दोपहरी में गन्ना कोड़ते थे और उनको जो है पीने के लिए जो सबसे पतला जो गुड़ होता है जिसको चोटा कहते हैं उसको देते थे पीने के लिए।
सब गोरख रस आई जो तो यहाँ तो सब पिए खा टमाटर रस सब पिए पेट भर।
कि ठाकुर ही कहता था कि अगर साल भर के शरबत में चमार के एक ठाकुर जो है धोती कुर्ता न बनवा ले तो वह असली ठाकुर नहीं है। वह ऊपर से गुड़ के ऊपर का जो कीड़ा मकोड़ा मर जाते थे उसी को छान के उनको पिलाते थे। शुद्ध गुड़ का शरबत नहीं देते थे।
Now, Dalits have almost completely stopped drinking jaggery water as part of the food. Like barnyard millet, jaggery water and sugarcane juice, pea leaves were also a part of Dalit food. The largest majority of Dalit families ate pea leaves as a leafy vegetable. Pea leaves were boiled and eaten in abundance. Often the pea leaves will be more in volume than the millet roti or rice eaten along with it. In 1990, 88.4% Dalit families always or often ate pea leaves along with mustard leaves at dinner in winter. Now, only 16.4% Dalit families eat pea leaves at dinner in winters. The inch-thick roti, the Indian variant of bread, and chutney, Indian variant of sauce made from chili and salt water, is the marker of the lowest quality food people eat. Often made from pearl millet or sorghum flour and associated with Dalits, most Dalit farm workers would leave for work without eating anything in the morning. In 1990, 81.5% Dalit families always or often ate roti chutney at lunch. That would be the first meal most Dalit farm workers would have. Pulses are the main source of protein in India, but being expensive, not many Dalits could afford buying pulses. Those who earlier ate pulses managed it in the form of a thin soup. Now, nearly all Dalits eat pulses, while in 1990, only 31% Dalit families ate pulses at dinner. In the North Indian countryside, roti, rice, pulse, vegetables together are considered a very respectable meal. People make every effort to serve the guests a combination of roti, rice, pulse and vegetables. By 1990, less than half of Dalit families could serve that meal to their guests. Now, 98.7% Dalit families are serving roti, rice, pulse and vegetables together to their guests at dinner.
पहले मतलब चटनी रोटी खा के गुजारा कर लेते थे, अभी दाल रोटी सब्जी ये सब मिल जाता है।
उनका स्तर बहुत अच्छा है। जैसे देखिए उनको चावल दाल रोटी सब्जी सब मिल जाता है। और जो घर बैठे बड़े आदमी लोग हैं जो बन रहे हैं कि हम धोआ करके चट्टी और चौपाटी पर क्या नाम है चट्टी पर बैठते हैं, पान खाते हैं और एक कप चाय पीते हैं, उनको ऐसा भोजन मुयस्सर नहीं होता।
दाल चावल सब्जी तो ये चलता ही है, ये तो खिलाएंगे। इस टाइम हमारे पास यही है।
दाल भात खायल जात है, दाल रोटी खायल जात है, बाजारे से सब्जी आवत ही खायल जाती है। मनो हर एक परिवर्तन जो है तो अब सही है, जब से उनका दुआर छूट गया।
आज दलित वर्ग जो है, मजदूर वर्ग जो है, ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय से बढ़िया भोजन कर रहा है।
Cardamom is an expensive spice that adds flavor to non-vegetarian food. Dalits are by tradition non-vegetarian, but not many had access to pricey spices, not at least to cardamom. That's why the Dalit food had its own distinctive character, often bland. In 1990, only 5.1% Dalit families always or often used cardamoms in cooking food. Nowadays, 86.9% Dalit families always use cardamoms in food. A radical shift in their food habit, from tackling hunger to becoming flavor seekers. A tomato on its own is no vegetable. Tomato is used for flavor along with other vegetables or as salad, which of course enriches vegetables. It is expensive and used by the rich only. Kashi study shows 1/4 of Dalit families bought tomatoes in 1990. Now, 87.8% Dalits buy tomatoes to use in vegetables. As the Kashi study shows, Dalits didn't have much access to wheat or rice. They survived mainly on millet. Millet has the same number of calories as wheat or rice. Certain foods Dalits ate contained much higher calories, protein and fat than the food caste Hindus ate. But most foods Dalits ate were stigmatized.
परोरा 400 रुपया किलो हो जाए क्या कहीं खरीदें जरूर।
आप देखें मार्केट लगती है माल टारी में, और देखें क्या परसेंट जो है बड़े आदमी खरीदते हैं, क्या परसेंट दलित खरीदता है। मुश्किल से 5% कोई जाता होगा। वो भी कोई रिश्तेदार आ गया उसे सम्मान करने के लिए जाता है कि उसको यह चीज़ बना के खिलाओ, या कोई फंक्शन हो गया उसमें खिला देते। ये तो सब रोज खाते हैं।
मीट मछली की दुकानी पर देखल जा तो 60% उधर है और 40% में बाभन मुसलमान ठाकुर सब रहे।
Not that Dalits now eat the same rich food as others eat. Caste Hindus would still be eating much better food, much greater in variety, nutrition and taste. But during 1990 to 2007, Dalits' food sources have changed radically, from millet-based to rice and wheat-based. In other words, Dalits are now entering into caste-neutral food sources. In 1990, Dalit life was hard and miserable. They had to grind flour in their home. They were not given any social respect. Amenities of modern life like a fan, television and phone were a dream to them. They were also deprived of basic facilities like appropriate clothing and pakka houses. What a slip is beneath a skirt, a petticoat is beneath a sari. A petticoatless woman in a sari would be in a see-through situation. It is an embarrassment to women who couldn't afford petticoats and a humiliation to male members of the family. Many Dalit farm workers would somehow manage to buy a sari, so poor in its fabric that it would fail to adequately cover the body. The Kashi study shows that in 1990, only 46.7% Dalit women always wore petticoats, while in 2007, 98.7% Dalit women wore petticoats. They may, however, still be wearing cheaper clothing, but are entering the clothing style common to all.
मला पहिरे के कपड़ा ना मिले, किनारी मोटकी चलल रह, उह झक मार के सब दोहर के पहिरे।
अरे देखे नहीं कुल ठकुरैनिया तो कहली कि अब तहे चमैनिया जौन हमन के धराऊं धैले तमनी कुल पहिर के फारत थी। ई होला कि भैया काहे ना तुहन लोगन का राज रहल तो तुहन लोगन चिथरा पहिरौलू, अब हमहन का राज है तो हमहनों के भगवान हमें देत हम तो हमन ओढ़त पहिरत हई।
In the mid-70s, the caste Hindu society relished a song. Chappal par chamain chale, sandal par dhuviniya. Hai more Rama, badal gail dunya. Oh my God, the world has changed so much that Dalit women are now sporting sandals and slippers. In fact, wearing slippers, sandals or shoes by Dalits was not merely a matter of comfort. Wearing sandals or slippers and shoes was considered a social defiance as well. There have been cases when Dalits were attacked for sporting shoes, although they have been the traditional designers and makers of shoes. Many men and women without slippers develop cracks in the feet, causing pain and shame both. In 1990, only 34.6% elderly Dalit women and men always wore sandals, slippers or shoes while visiting marketplaces. Now, nearly all Dalit men and women have access to shoes, slippers and sandals. Marrying off daughters is the greatest social test of parents in India. All try to extend the best of the hospitality to the guests at the wedding party. Cars and jeeps, mattresses and suites were the preserve of the upper caste landlords, and Dalit grooms could only dream of it. They would often ride cycle rickshaws in their weddings. In 1990, only 29.1% Dalit grooms always used cars and jeeps in their wedding. The picture has changed now. All Dalit grooms and brides use cars as a symbol of pride.
अरे पहले अब काना मिर्ती ले दू छेनक मिठाई रसगुल्ला चलल बा, पहले लकड़िया मिठाई चलल है, आइया करियाई भेली सब बरतिया खा के पानी पी ले, अब भी नहीं के खा के चलिए मैं बारात लेके घरे भेली ले ले, मेहरारू पैदल पैदल चलिए मैं, अब तो मारुति जाती है, हेलीकॉप्टर जाता, तब तो ना जाते रहे।
आज 15 साल और 20 साल के इधर तो परिवर्तन हुआ है कुछ, उधर तो हम लोग की बारात पैदल जाती थी, बहन और बहुएं जो है पैदल आती थी।
Grinding grain and wheat manually at home was an all-woman work, cutting across caste lines historically. The women would rise before dawn to grind grains to be used for making bread. By 1960s, motorized grinding machines had reached villages. Yet, even by 1990, 3/4 of all Dalit families still ground grain at home. Now, nearly all Dalit families get grains ground in motorized grinders in the locality. By 1990, a few Dalit families had access to shampoos and soaps. The poorest among Dalits, mostly farm workers, would instead use black mud to wash hair. In 1990, a negligible 0.4% Dalits washed their hair with shampoo. Now, over 1/3 Dalit families use shampoo to wash hair, notwithstanding the fact that Dalits still buy cheaper brands, often packed in small pouches.
शैम्पू लगावल जाला, साबुन लगावल जाला, हाँ, हिंगंगे का तेल लगाइला, हिंगंगे का तेल ना धरी कब मथवा लगी बस।
The kacha mud huts or thatched houses were often associated with Dalits. During heavy rains, sometimes these mud houses would collapse, causing death and injuries to the inmates. The mud and thatched houses were not only about comfort or safety. The architecture too followed caste hierarchies. Sometimes Dalits were not allowed to have higher ceilings even if they could afford to. The Dalit houses had typical stereotyped architecture. Low ceilings, very low entrance gate, so low that in most Dalit houses one had to bend while entering. Still smaller in size, a majority of Dalit families now live in pakka brick houses with caste-neutral architecture. In 1990, only 18.2% Dalit families lived in pakka brick-made houses. The brick houses follow a common architectural pattern with universal ceiling and gate heights. Now, 64.5% Dalit families lived in pakka houses.
ज़मीन आसमान का ही फ़र्क है हमारे पास। इसलिए फ़र्क है कि हम जिस समय की यहाँ झोपड़ी में रह रहे, खपड़ा में रह रहे थे, आज हम कोठी में रह रहे हैं 15-20 साल के अंदर।
What cars mean to the urban middle class in cities, bicycles mean to the rural poor. Not long ago, a bicycle used to be a prized possession. Marriages were sealed or broken on the question of a bicycle as a dowry item. In theft or robberies, bicycles used to be one of the prime targets. Bicycles are not mere means of transport, but also symbols of pride. Now, the largest majority, 84.1% of Dalits, have at least one bicycle in the family, while in 1990, only 46.6% Dalit families had a bicycle. Before 1990, phone connectivity was a lifestyle statement. After 1990, phone connectivity has become a social necessity. Now, over 1/3 of Dalit families have phones and a social statement to make, while in 1990, only 0.4% Dalit families had a landline or a cell phone connectivity. A TV antenna on one's rooftop in the countryside is not only about news and entertainment. It is also a social statement, a social marker of progress. In 1990, 1% of Dalit families had a TV set. Now, over 1/5 of Dalit families have TV sets and a social statement to make. Lifting dead cattle and skinning them was the ultimate humiliation Dalits had to undergo. In fact, much of the reform movement in this part of the countryside revolved around asking Dalits to stop lifting and skinning dead cattle. Whenever the cattle died, it was the duty of the village Dalits to lift and dump them in open fields. This only Dalit occupation is now on its way out. In most villages, the non-Dalits lift their cattle on their own. In 1990, in 19.1% villages, only Dalits lifted dead cattle of non-Dalits. In 2007, only in 0.6% villages, Dalits lift dead cattle of non-Dalits.
द्वारे पर चौवा मर जा, वहाँ से गाड़िए देते आवा कुल, चमार भागल जा उठावा.
Traditionally, midwifery was also a Dalit-only occupation. Most rural Indians aged 20 today were born at home, with Dalit women playing midwives. Midwifery in the countryside is considered one of the meanest jobs. The Dalit women would not only facilitate the birth of the baby, but also give massage to the mother twice a day. Her job went further. Since most houses had no toilets and the mother cannot step out of the house for the first 12 days when a ceremony takes place, it would be the duty of the Dalit woman to collect feces and urine of the mother twice a day, morning and evening, and dump that in an open field.
उनकी किहन जब बच्चा पैदा होखा तब वहाँ से हेता नहीं एक अनाज गठियवले यहाँ खूटे का करत हवा रे का बाबू साहब का अरे फलाने की लड़की पैदा भइल है नहीं लड़का पैदा भयल है चला नार काटे की है तो जब कह देली नहीं तब तो उनकर हालत खराब आज जब निकल गई अपन हंसुआ हंसुआ लेके तब तो बढ़िया है तो 8 दिन 10 दिन 12 दिन उनके जाए के मीसा घासा तो वही जगह उनके धाने का भात मिले आई जे कमाए जाए तो के सामा का भात.
As per the Kashi findings, in 1990, in 93.3% villages, only Dalit women performed midwives' functions for birth of babies. Now, that practice is nearly over as most babies are born in hospitals.
सरवन साइकिल बनाता है, वो यही ऐलान करके कहता है कि बाबू साहब हमार औरत माई चाची दादी तुहार नार कटली लड़का भैले में अब तुहार पतोह मिडवाइफ भैल है चला हमारे पतोहे का नार काट जा लड़का भैल उलट गया.
Drinking water or eating in a Dalit home by non-Dalits was no less than a religious sacrilege. They would refuse, citing some reason. Just ate some time back. I'm on fast today. I'm not in the mood. Now, there seems to be a sign of desegregation as about 1/5 of the time non-Dalits are reconciled to Dalit hospitality. In this part of the countryside, most upper caste families would throw a public dinner on the occasion of their children's marriage, death of the elderly, and on religious functions. They would often invite a member each from all the families of the village, irrespective of caste or religion. Dalits too would be invited. Dalits would, however, be either asked to eat when all had eaten or would be seated separately. Most of the times, Dalits would be asked to collect their plates made of leaves and throw them away after they had eaten. In 1990, in 76.6% villages, Dalits were always seated separately in public dinners hosted by non-Dalits.
5 में बैठा किसी को नहीं खिलाया जाता.
सब जात खा लेता था तो बाद में बला दो चमारों को तो चमार बाद में सबसे बाद में खाते थे. अलग एक बात लगती थी इन लोगों की. सब लोग खा लेते थे इसके बाद इन लोगों की बात लेकर रहती थी वो अपना लोग खाते पीते थे.
The practice of seating Dalits separately is one of the most visible forms of untouchability at work. That practice is now nearing its end.
वो जैसे इनकी इज्जत ब्राह्मण ठाकुर या बाहिर करते हैं वैसे पासी हरिजन जो भी आएंगे जो आ गए हैं जिनको बुलाया गया है उनको खिला देंगे.
अब तो लोग करीब करीब वही में मिलजुल के सब खाए वो लेते. अरे टाट बीत जाला ई ना करने जाला कि हाँ तू आवा जे बैठ गल ते खा
अबन करिए, सम्मान न देवा तो अबन करिए। हमें तो ये तिलक रह लिया, पहले हुआ कुल खा लिया ना, और सब रिश्तेदार बाद में खाइले।
This is a big story, the biggest finding of the Kashi study. In the region's known history, never ever a Dalit could be the employer of caste Hindus. Helped by machines, the ex-masters of Dalits are now reconciled to serving even Dalits. Not that Dalits have become masters of the upper caste, but this only shows signs of the loosening grip of caste. In 1990, in only 1.1% villages, the non-Dalit tractor owners always tilled Dalits' land, driving tractors themselves. Now, in 2007, almost always, whenever called upon, the caste Hindus plough Dalits' land for wages.
खेती बाबू अब मालूम से बैल गोल तो ना रखल जाता हूँ, कहीं एक जन रखबो करिए तो हर सजवन मिली। अब जौन है ट्रैक्टर वोक्टर से मैंने जोता लेला जगह जौन बा।
ट्रैक्टर जोतने वाले कौन लोग?
वह ससुर हम अब तो वो लोग हरवाई करते हैं, मन कर
हरवाई कर रहे हैं ना।
क्या करते हैं? अरे बाबा ठाकुर तब उन्हीं के पास था बेमतवा पहले कहा तो वो ट्रैक्टर लेते हम हाई लेते हम हाउ लेते हम टिबेल फलान ढेकान उन्हीं के पास न है भाई। अब जौन है हम ही से लेते हम, अरे पैसा हम ही से लेते हम जोता हम जैसे हमारे में मजूरिया करी कि ना, अब वो लोग कर था।
मतलब एक बार आप बोल देते हैं कि आके हमारा खेत जोत जाता,
हाँ
सुबह आ जाते हैं।
हाँ क्या करें, अबे करिए उनके पैसा कमाए थे,
मतलब सब उल्टा हो गया।
हाँ कुल बतिया उलट गई।
बैल तो हमारे गांव में इस समय एकदम नहीं रह गए हैं, न तो उनके घर रह गए हैं। वही जो है अब वो है आकर के स्वयं खुद हम लोगों को सुबह जो है जगाते हैं, तब हम लोग जा कर के जो है बुलाते थे, और आज वो खुद अपना जो है इस हम लोगों के ट्रैक्टर से करवा रहे हैं, जोतवा रहे हैं, पैसा दे रहे हैं। उसका जो है जो मजदूरी हम लोग जो है देते थे उनको आज वो खुद दे रहे हैं, करवा रहे हैं। उल्टा हो ही गया है।
अरे हम खुद जोतनी है, और सब क्या नाम है कलकत्ता बम्बई इधर उधर घूम रहे हैं, क्या नाम है काम कर रहे हैं, और औरतें जो उनके घर की हैं हम खुद उनका खेत जोतते हैं।
Hal means the plough. Vaha means the ploughman. Between the plough and the ploughman were the bullocks. The halwahas in modern India are comparable to the serfs of Europe's high Middle Ages. In fact, the halwahi system could be more degrading than serfdom. In serfdom, there was no social identity, color, race bias, as the serfs and the masters both belonged to the same stock of people. There has never been an instance when a Dalit was a landlord with a non-Dalit as his halwaha. It was an exceptional one-party dictated social contract executed on Dalits under coercion. Since the remotest antiquity, the plough, bullock, ploughman as a farming tool has been the mainstay of farming in India. Every inch of land sown in India was tilled by the ploughman. The plough, bullock, ploughman isn't merely a farm machine. It is a farm machine which operates in a given social order. The exceptional nature of this machine lies in the fact that while not all Dalits could be halwahas, all halwahas would invariably be Dalits. So despised and degraded was the work of tilling the land using bullock and man-driven ploughs that the upper caste, the traditional ruling caste, would not even touch the handle or the muthia of the machine. Touching the plough was no less than an occupational blasphemy.
देखिए हमारी जो व्यवस्था पहले की व्यवस्था थी ब्राह्मण राज की, खेती करना भी पाप मानते थे, उसको खोदना और हेंगाना वो टोटल पाप मानते थे, खेत में पैर नहीं डालते थे।
ब्राह्मण ठाकुर ये लोग हल नहीं चला सकते, वही उनकी शिक्षा थी, लेकिन धीरे धीरे जब आदमी नहीं मिले तो सब लोग अपने जोतने लगे।
Under the halwahi system, the landless Dalit and the upper caste landlord would enter into an unwritten contract. The landless submits his labor to the landlord for round the year, guaranteeing that he would work for no other landlord. His duties involve tilling the land, sowing seeds, irrigating, and finally harvesting the crop. He also takes care of bullocks and other cattle owned by the landlords. In return, the landlord gives the halwaha half an acre of fertile land on which he does independent farming. The female members of the halwaha family take responsibility of feeding cattle, cleaning their dung and urine, and other works related to farming. So watertight was the contract that if the halwaha had to visit a relative or go to the town, he must supply a replacement, maybe his son or brother. Needless to say, Dalit families under Halwahi system were socially condemned and disrespected even within the community.
जो दावरी होती थी बैलों से, बैलों के पीछे पीछे जो है हलवाहे उसको हाँकते थे, और जो बैल गोबर करते थे उसको बटोर के इकट्ठा कर देते थे, उसको लाते थे तो उनके घर के लोग जो है उसको धो करके उसमें जो अन्न निकलता था उसको सुखवाते थे, उसको पीटते थे, उसको धोते थे, फिर उसको जाता में पीस करके वही भोजन के लिए उनका जो है वो कार्य होता था। और उसी के लालच में जो है दिन भर उनके यहाँ जो है सवर्णों के यहाँ जो है काम करते थे।
With only 1.2% Dalit families left with the Halwahi system, India's serfdom has now ended.
आज छोटी जात यही कहते हैं कि एक समय था जो हम लोग बाबू साहब का हल जोतते थे, अब समय हम लोगों का आ गया है, हमारा हल बाबू साहब जोतेंगे। उल्टा हो गया, तो बैल नहीं जोतते हैं लेकिन ट्रैक्टर वो जोता रहा।
पहले सब हरवाई करते थे तो वही मिलता था जितना मिलना चाहिए। अब जो है जैसे 15 साल की इधर जो है वो ये सोचे कि चलो इससे नहीं हमारा गुजारा होने वाला है, थोड़ा और आगे बढ़ गए, थोड़ा
आगे बढ़ गए मतलब
जैसे परदेश चले गए तो उससे ज़्यादा आमदनी मिलने लगी, उससे अपना बाल बच्चा परिवार थोड़ा स्वतंत्र होने लगा।
जितना हरवाही में नहीं मिलता था हम 2 महीने में कमा लिए, हाँ तो अब बढ़िया वो कुछ नहीं था, एक हम लोग की मजबूरी थी, हम लोग बंधे थे।
A farm worker, often described as landless labor in official lexicon, is another occupational category where workers are under the control and command system of landlords. Living under similar social and economic conditions as halwahas, farm workers are, however, free workers not tied to individual landlord families. The sharp decline from 75.9% families with at least one member working for landlords in 1990 to 45.6% in 2007 indicates a new phenomenon of Dalits moving over to non-farm work. In other words, a significant proportion of Dalits are now out of the control and command system of the landlord. Considered impure and polluting for millennia, Dalits were never considered worthy of any partnership. This is a path-breaking development. Nearly 1/3 of Dalit families have now entered into the sharecropping arrangement. A new chapter of social desegregation has begun in this region of the country. In 1990, 16.7% Dalit families were into sharecropping arrangements with landlords. In 2007, 31.4% Dalit families are into sharecropping arrangements with landlords. Post-independence, most Dalits hoped that the state would employ them, thus triggering emancipation. Though the fact remains that nowhere in the world the state can employ all its people or any particular caste or race or ethnic group. After more than half a century of affirmative action practices, the state could touch only 10% of the Dalit families, even at the best of the welfare times in 1990. That is not to deny the fact that the state produced the Dalit middle class that has acted as the role model for the larger Dalit mass, and it is this class of Dalits which confronts the larger caste society. To that end, affirmative actions are necessary, and so also the role of the state. In 1990, 7.3% Dalit families had at least one member in a government job. In 2007, 6.9% Dalit families have at least one member in a government job. When the Kashi researchers asked the Dalit household heads, "What do you expect your children to become?" a massive 94.5% preferred government jobs over farming, factory work and businesses. This shows the immense amount of trust the community has in the state as the deliverer of Dalit good. Another question. When the Kashi researchers asked the Dalit household heads about their food and clothing today, in comparison with 1990, 61% said much better and 37.3% said improved. Only 0.4% household heads reported that the situation had worsened. The big question: how did it happen? Why did this not happen before 1990? Is it God's divine intervention? Is it man's social engineering? Is it the state's welfareism? Or is it caused by a phenomenon autonomous of God, man and the state? During 1990-2007, villages in the Bilariaganj block lost a huge number of Dalits to cities, causing a massive labour shortage in the region. A total of 7,695 Dalit youth fled to cities. 4,510 Dalit youth moved over to non-farm works locally, and during 1990-2007, the Bilariaganj block lost a total of 12,205 Dalit youth to non-farm work. Post-1990, in this Bilariaganj block, the caste order is not able to function with the same authority as it did for centuries. Largely unintended and unforeseen, economic reform is undermining caste order in the Bilariaganj block. Due to the massive shift from farm to non-farm work, landlords faced a massive labour shortage. Labour shortage pushed farm wages up. With none to take care, bullocks became the butcher's delight. Unable to cope with the labour shortage and wage hikes, landlords began the following. Mechanization of farming through tractors and harvesters. Selling off some portions of land. And entering into sharecropping arrangements with their ex-halvahas and landless labourers. Post-1990, a massive industrial expansion opened up lower-level opportunities for Dalits, mostly in non-formal, non-organized industrial sector. Suffocating under repressive caste order, Dalit youth moved to the cities. Empowered by remittances, family members back home too withdrew from farm work, aggravating the labour shortage even more. All of a sudden, a large number of Dalit families came out of the command and control structure of landlords. This new phenomenon de-linked Dalits from their ex-landlords. Unable to cope with the art of farming, landlords once again reached out to their ex-farm workers, the halvahas, this time as partners in a sharecropping arrangement. This is the most serious development in the traditional social ordering in the Bilariaganj block. The sources of the Dalits' livelihood have shifted dramatically. Under the changed scenario, the traditional caste ordering is under strain. Between 1990 and 2007, in this block of Azamgarh district, a sea change has occurred in the lives of Dalits. The largest majority of Dalits have now access to caste-neutral food regime, caste-neutral occupations, and caste-neutral lifestyle. To the extent Dalits have emancipated from farm work, to that extent the caste system too has loosened. that is best reflected in the Dalits turning into employers of their ex-landlords. The landmark transformation witnessed during 1990 to 2007 is also reflected in the politics of Uttar Pradesh, where the mainstream society chose a Dalit as its ruler. As the wheel of reforms rolls on much faster, where will Dalits be by 2025? So watch out for the coming decades, as India's gadgetic belt seems to be seeking a new social contract, an antithesis of its painful past.